revealed how a black janitor surprised the millionaire CEO and changed his life in just 3 moves. Marcus adjusted his mop, glancing around the towering glass walls of the boardroom where the tension clung thicker than the dust he banished daily. He'd spent over a decade within these walls, mopping floors, cleaning offices, but today felt different. The refinery of polished surfaces held not just reflection, but an overwhelming sense of despair. The once bright smiles of the high-powered executives were now replaced with furrowed brows and downcast glances. At the center of this storm stood Richard Thompson, the millionaire CEO, his eyes dimmer punctuating the weight of his faltering empire. Marcus felt a pang of empathy for the man. Beneath the sharp suits and polished demeanor lay a strain that echoed through the air. Every day, as he gripped the handle of his mop, Marcus felt the tug of his own dreams, visions of a business he longed to build, encapsulated by his grandmother's unwavering belief in his potential. Yet here he was, visible only as an unwelcome specter in a soot-stacked room where dreams felt crushed beneath ambition. Would they ever see him for more than his janitorial uniform? That inner voice wrestled with his quiet hope. Could he, a humble janitor, dare to enter this world of corporate giants? Marcus paused, tension coiling in his gut as voices jostled around him. The third-floor boardroom door swung open. Frantic footsteps echoed against the walls. Richard's voice, raised in frustration, pierced through Marcus's heart with each syllable. The news was bad. Apparently, an essential deal was unraveling, and the crack in Richard's facade widened with every ticking minute. The thought of reaching out sent waves of dread coursing through Marcus. What if he speaks up and they laugh? His hands fidgeted, gripping the mop tighter, his longing for recognition crashing against the icy walls of doubt. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His resolve momentarily bolstered by Richard's palpable turmoil, Marcus felt the fire of his ambition ignite against the encroaching fear. He didn't just want to mop the floors, he craved to unveil a path for change. But as he pondered his approach, self-doubt snaked through him. Words began to swirl in his mind, the mix of trepidation and determination consuming him. What could he possibly offer a man like Richard? What value did he hold against the backdrop of corporate stature? A moment of serenity descended as Marcus made his decision. The crowded thoughts wrestled within him, each one demanding to take precedence, battling the urge to stay in his lane. He could just sweep through the room silently and keep dreaming. But this time felt different. As the clock ticked away, Marcus felt every second reminding him of the life he yearned to ignite. The stakes had risen. He must act, but with it came a shuddering realization. Neither man could afford to remain unchanged, and that terrifying thought shimmered at the edge of his mind. The path forward loomed with suffocating uncertainty, leaving him on the brink of exposure, yet desperate to bridge worlds that had collided against their will. Would his flames of ambition shine bright enough to illuminate a path for them both? Marcus inhaled deeply, steeling himself for the moment he had both dreaded and anticipated. He stepped toward Richard with deliberate steps, the sound of his shoes against the polished floor sending ripples of awareness through the boardroom. The executives remained oblivious to him, consumed by their own turmoil, but Marcus felt the weight of their gazes press against his back like invisible chains. He pushed the fear down, allowing his determination to rise. As he approached Richard, the CEO's sunken eyes shifted to his form, eyebrows furrowed in confusion. This was the moment of truth. He had only one shot at making an impression, no room for dilly-dallying, no space for failure. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson," he began, his voice steadier than his nerves suggested. "I couldn't help but overhear the meeting. I have a thought. Or maybe it's more like a suggestion." The boardroom fell silent, the air laden with expectation, as eyes darted between Marcus and the esteemed CEO. Richard's brow twitched, an uncertainty that mirrored Marcus's racing heart. Would he be mocked, dismissed, or, shockingly, would he be heard? "Go on," Richard urged, his tone laced with cautious intrigue. Taking a breath, Marcus conjured the analytical mind he had used for years as he observed how the executives operated. "I noticed you were discussing the upcoming merger. Have we considered targeting the smaller firms? Building relationships on the ground level can sometimes yield the strongest partnerships. They're hungry for opportunities, and stability among the little guys often translates to confidence for larger deals." To the murmurs of surprise from the others, Richard's expression shifted. Something shifted in his eyes. An ember sparked in the ashes of doubt. "Interesting perspective," he said slowly, "but why should we go that route?" The challenge hung in the air like a tightrope. Marcus was standing on it now. "Because they're underappreciated," Marcus replied, the words springing forth with unexpected clarity. "They hold untapped resources and talent. You could essentially train them to align with your vision. Even tailored training programs could solidify long-term loyalty. You could turn a liability into a strategic asset with just a bit of nurturing." With each word, the tension began to dissipate. Marcus could see Richard pore over his thoughts, values jingling at the edges of Marcus's suggestions. He had stepped onto their playing field, and for the first time the air felt electric, not suffocating. Richard shifted in his seat, considering. "What else?" he asked. Marcus sensed curiosity blooming in Richard's demeanor, a chance to be more than a janitor, but a catalyst for evolution, even within himself. Could he pursue further ideas, daring to mentor this man back to strength? Yet self-doubt clung around Marcus at the thought of taking the plunge deeper into corporate waters. Was he skilled enough to walk this fine line? Could his voice carry enough weight? And in that split second, he realized the latent potential of his own thoughts. Perhaps his years of observation held wisdom, a kind of insight invisible to those immersed only in strategy. With a newfound vigor, Marcus felt himself pivot. Perhaps a workshop series, focusing on grassroots innovation to encourage collaboration. The larger firms seem so disconnected, but these smaller entities, they breathe the same air as your target demographic. Richard's expression began to shift, painting a scene of reconsideration. For Marcus, the struggle of being a janitor in that room morphed from limitless self-doubt to a burgeoning self-identity, a potential harbored within the soul of everyday life. Just as Richard opened his mouth to respond, the sharp ring of a smartphone pierced the charged atmosphere, and a sense of urgency taken hold. Marcus's heart raced anew. Had he stirred the pot too vigorously, or propelled the very change he sought? Each moment hung in abeyance, thick with uncertainty. The room seemed on the brink of transformation, yet just as easily could tumble back into silence. Would they further explore these ideas, or would this be a fleeting encounter, lost to the tides of bureaucracy again? The echo of those thoughts echoed like the final pulse of a drum roll, a prelude to what was to come. Would he dare to press further into this unknown territory, or was it time to retreat into the shadows? The answers lay ahead, within the whims of the men and women he had sought to impress. The abrupt sound of the smartphone broke Marcus's concentration, the moment hanging precariously between potential triumph and crushing disaster. Richard's face clouded as he fished the phone from his pocket, urgency radiating from every pore. Senses primed for confrontation, Marcus's mind raced. Was this the end of their exchange? Richard stood abruptly, scanning the room as he answered. The remaining executives' eyes turned toward their leader, the buzz of speculation swirling like a frenzied storm. Marcus felt a pang of irritation mixed with helplessness. What if this twist diverted the attention away from his insights? He pressed his palms against the edge of the conference table, the polished surface cool beneath his touch, grounding him amidst the emotional chaos. As Richard paced, the frustration seeped into Marcus's consciousness. He questioned whether his voice truly held any authority, mentally tracing back through the standard operating protocols watched over by the seasoned executives. The winds of this corporate storm were unpredictable, yet a dagger of resolve pierced through his self-doubt. Could he wield influence, even just a spark, to keep the conversation alive? Richard ended the call quickly and turned his focus back to the room, his demeanor altered, clearly rattled. "We need to reassess our solidified strategies. The merger could be in jeopardy," he announced. Those words ringing heavy, the gravity palpable like a sputtering fuse nearing an explosion. The air crackled with tension, voices rose, panic rose, as the executives reconsidered their paths. This was Marcus's moment. The seeds of courage that had just begun to germinate needed nourishment. Why should Richard or anyone in this room think they were above collaboration with smaller firms? "Mr. Thompson," he interrupted with an urgency matching the room's energy, "if I may, what if we pivot this crisis into an opportunity? Instead of viewing the merger as an end goal, could it not be seen as a chance to redefine partnerships, to re-evaluate how we can innovate collectively?" Richard paused, interest peaked once more. "You're suggesting we not only salvage the merger, but reorient our entire business strategy toward partnerships? Yes?" With each word, Marcus found the pieces of his thoughts coalescing with clarity. What if, instead of a traditional merger approach, we integrate with some of these smaller firms on a trial basis? Let them mentor us in the nuances of their market. Show them we're willing to nurture their strengths. It makes us agile and can lessen the risk of our current strategy, depending solely on bigger firms. Around the table, Marcus noticed a flicker of intrigue spark in the executive's eyes, a dawning realization that even the janitor might hold the key to unlocking new perspectives. Perhaps the dynamic of power was not what it seemed. Perhaps his observations over the years contained grains of transformative truths. Marcus continued, emboldened, "And with workshops as proposed, we create not only loyalty, but a feedback loop, ensuring that our decisions are reflective of real-world needs. We're not just selling, we're building sustainable connections." A murmur swept through the room, hesitation replaced with cautious consideration. The unease might change into energy. They could be hungry for sustainable pathways instead of clinging to outdated tactics. Richard nodded slowly, a pattern of approval evident on his features. "Let's focus on that. Perhaps the merger could evolve into something more sustainable." Before Marcus dared to celebrate, he felt a familiar pang of uncertainty begin to creep back in. What if this was ephemeral? He was still an outsider, tethered to a world out of reach, blurring the lines between a mere janitor and a potential contributor. But then something shifted, a newfound empowerment pulsing through him. His ideas were sparking change. However fleeting, they forged strong roots into his identity that had lain dormant for too long. He concluded resolutely, he wouldn't let this chance slip away. Just as Richard was about to issue a directive to his team, the door swung open, ushering in a new figure, a looming silhouette against light, demanding attention. Each eye turned, and Marcus felt the atmosphere thicken. Who was this unexpected arrival? And how would they affect the fragile momentum he had just ignited? Could their presence further challenge everything he'd begun to build? The questions loomed, thrumming in the air like the final notes of a symphony waiting for its climax. A figure stepped into the room, and Marcus's heart quickened. It was the new VP of Corporate Relations, a renowned strategist known for her prowess in navigating corporate treacheries. Her reputation had preceded her, but the whispers of her ambition were both awe-inspiring and intimidating. This was not just a casual interruption. It felt like the entry of an unforeseen variable into a finely tuned equation. "Sorry for the interruption, everyone," she stated, her voice firm yet smooth as her presence enveloped the room. "I was informed of the developing situation regarding the merger, and I believe there are strategies we haven't explored that could turn this into a decisive advantage." The eyes of the executives flitted between her and Richard, uncertainty flickering like shadows. Marcus couldn't tell if this was an opportunity or a threat. The moment Richard had subtly encouraged collaboration, here was someone who represented the very corporate culture that could potentially stifle Marcus's rising influence. "Lana," Richard nodded, quickly shifting gears, "we were just discussing the possibility of integrating smaller firms to enhance our innovative capacity." Lana raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "That's an interesting thought, Richard. I like the spirit of collaboration." Yet her focus turned to Marcus, and he instantly felt the weight of her gaze, as if she were gauging his worth. "But I also believe we must make data-driven, aggressive decisions rather than charity projects. Our focus should be on leveraging our existing assets for maximum profit." Marcus's mind raced. Was she suggesting that partnerships were merely a guise for exploitation? The fire within him flickered, igniting doubt just as much as it fueled resolve. He took a breath, recalling the clarity he had just achieved. "If I may," he interjected cautiously, surprised by the surge of confidence that punctuated his words. "The drive for profit is crucial. Yet in prioritizing immediate assets, we risk overlooking the long-term value of relationship building. This merger could be a bastion of innovation or another statistic in our failure column. I propose integrating small firms not as lost causes, but as allies in our greater mission." Lana's gaze sharpened, a mixture of respect and scrutiny sewn into her expression. "You have a unique perspective, considering." She let the words hang in the air, deliberately emphasizing his position as an outsider. The hushed murmurs began anew, executives now more curious than frightened. "Right," she continued, shifting the atmosphere again, "but when times are crucial, what we need is robust decision-making. Emotional elements like loyalty and community should follow strategy, not precede it." Was she implying that the insights he had shared were tinged with unprofessional sentimentality? Marcus felt the familiar pang of doubt creep back in, yet he fought against it. This internal battle ignited within him a realization that he was not just a janitor or a cog in the corporate machine. He had a voice that could challenge the traditional paradigms. "I understand the necessity for strategic decision-making," he replied, keeping his stance firm despite the weight of scrutiny pressing down on him. "But strategic thinking isn't devoid of empathy. Our relationships shape our market perception, and in this global era, our brand is as much about profit as it is about connection." Lana studied him carefully, as if shifting through layers of potential. Richard interjected, "Maybe this is what we need, a dual approach. A merger that is not just business at its core, but relational in its expansion." The tension in the room swelled, the air thick with the dichotomy of thought. Marcus felt his footing strengthening. Who would he be in this growing dichotomy of strategies? An agent of change or an echo of traditionalism? Just then, the hum of conversation ceased as Lana broke into a smile. "You're stirring something here, Marcus. But remember, the realm of corporate strategies can be ruthless." The words hung heavily, a warning tinged with intrigue. As curiosity sparked in the minds around him, he wondered if he had unwittingly put himself at the forefront of a corporate war, full of opportunity but fraught with peril. What had begun as a fragile awakening of his potential was now a tightrope walk beneath the looming shadows of ambition. How would Marcus navigate this tumultuous atmosphere? Was his newfound role sustainable, or was it merely a momentary flicker before the darkness closed in? Rising doubts began to swirl as he grappled with the escalating stakes. Perhaps it was only a matter of time before he confronted the deeper implications of everything he hoped to achieve. Marcus left the conference room, the weight of his interaction with Lana pressing against him like a tangible force. The carpet felt plush underfoot, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in his mind. Each step pulsed with the energy of his newfound advocacy, yet doubt lingered in the shadows of his confidence. Was he truly equipped to stand against the current of corporate tradition? His heart raced as he approached the break room. He needed to regroup, to reflect on what had just transpired. As he entered, the usual sense of burnt coffee and stale pastries assaulted his senses. He filled a cup, the hot liquid offering a momentary solace. The clatter of the mug against the countertop broke the stillness, much like the disruptions he had just introduced into the boardroom. Sipping cautiously, Marcus replayed Lana's words in his head. She was formidable, her presence a crisp and calculated force. But was there a way to turn her scrutiny into an alliance? He could follow the path of least resistance, echoing the strategies of those around him, but that would bury his voice, extinguishing the flame ignited in their meeting. He had stepped into uncharted waters and realized he could not allow the tides of others' opinions to drown him. The coffee cooled, and he absent-mindedly stirred it while staring into the liquid abyss, lost in thought. Then it hit him. Just days prior, he had been merely a custodian, cleaning the same floors that now echoed with his contributions. To navigate this corporate minefield, he needed to adopt a dual mindset, a strategist who operated with empathy, but one also steeped in the gritty realism of corporate maneuverings. He realized his journey was not just about voice, but also about knowledge. Determined, Marcus pulled out his notebook filled with observations and insights collected over his time at the company. There was potential in compiling data, reflecting on patterns and, more significantly, using them to bolster his ideas. What if he could suggest evidence-backed strategies for integrating smaller firms, demonstrating their potential impact on profitability and community? As he scribbled ideas fervently, the words began to crystallize into actionable plans. Emerging from the break room, a renewed purpose fueled his stride. The office corridors felt different now, almost electric, as he approached Richard's office. He knocked lightly and entered, the sound of shuffling papers and keyboard clattering filling the air. Richard looked up, and his expression shifted from surprise to recognition, as though he sensed the urgency behind Marcus's demeanor. "Marcus, what's on your mind?" Richard asked, removing his glasses and leaning back. "I'd like to talk about how we can present a more robust strategy for the merger," Marcus ventured, the conviction flooding his veins. "If we can frame our integration of smaller firms with real data-driven projections about profitability and innovation, we might sway Lana and the board in favor of our approach." Richard raised an eyebrow, impressed. "That's forward thinking. But are you ready to handle the potential backlash?" Marcus hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty piercing through his resolve. The risk was significant, and Lana wouldn't be easily swayed by mere words. Yet this was a turning point. He understood that there was no easy way to navigate corporate waters without some turbulence. "I believe it's necessary to take the risk," he asserted, awareness flashing in his eyes. "Bear the storm to create a future where we lead and collaborate rather than exploit." Richard nodded slowly, setting aside his skepticism. "All right, I'm on board. Let's see what you can put together." As they began brainstorming PowerPoint slides, a renewed fire burned in Marcus, propelling him into a vortex of ideas and strategies. However, Curiosity about how Lana would react surged within him, mingling with a mounting tension. The stakes continued to rise. Would this strategy ultimately secure Marcus's place in the company, or would it expose him to the harsh winds of corporate criticism? The next few days unfolded like a cat-and-mouse game as he prepared to weigh his moral and professional growth against the looming presence of Lana. The defining moment was approaching. He felt it in his bones. He'd built a bold foundation, but the true test loomed. Would he emerge stronger, or would he falter in the firestorm to come? Marcus dove into his research, his desk overflowing with reports and charts, each stack an opportunity to bolster his position. Pages of data spread across the surface, forming a mosaic of potential insights. He pored over market trends and statistical analyses with a singular focus, and amidst the constant clatter of keyboard strokes and soft office chatter, he felt a familiar surge of determination. The countdown to the presentation grew shorter, and the weight of each tick of the clock pressed down on him, intensifying his resolve. He penned notes, reinforcing his preliminary ideas with factual support. The synthesis of hard data and innovative concepts ignited a fire in him, but the looming spectre of Lana challenged every inch of his progress. Time and again, he envisioned her piercing gaze, a reminder of the hurdles he faced. Could his suggestions withstand her scrutiny? Would she see the value in his perspective? These questions whirled around him like hornets, pressing him to sharpen his arguments. The stakes were higher than simply surviving their upcoming meeting. This was an opportunity to redefine how he perceived himself within this corporate landscape. Focused on building a narrative that intertwined empathy with hard numbers, Marcus transformed his presentation not just into a series of slides, but a compelling story. Here was a chance to convey a vision grounded in moral values. The integration of smaller firms wasn't merely a line on a balance sheet, but a way to foster innovation, flexibility, and community engagement. What he was proposing wasn't just practical, it was a path toward a sustainable culture within the company. A ping from his email snapped him from his thoughts. Richard's message brought confirmation of their scheduled presentation with the board, a mixture of anticipation and dread coursing through Marcus. He scoured his notes, ensuring every statistic, every projection was flawless. Hours dwindled into late nights, sleep often yielding to caffeine. The more he prepared, the deeper his commitment crystallized. This was not merely a presentation. It was a testament to his journey from custodian to strategist. Yet, with each mounting success, the reality of rejection haunted him. The fear of losing everything he had built over the last few weeks twisted inside him like a snake. On the eve before the presentation, Marcus took a rare moment of solitude. He reflected on the courage it took to voice his opinion, to push back against tradition. In the stillness, beneath the glow of his desk lamp, he felt the weight of expectation press upon him, not only from Lana or Richard, but from himself. In that silence, he discovered a hidden resolve. He realized this wasn't just about making a professional impact. It was about aligning his values with his aspirations, standing against complacency. A part of him had emerged. This was longer about surviving. It was about gaining agency. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror, his reflection staring back with a newfound intensity. The stakes felt monumental, but he resolved to embrace the risk, to offer his insights unapologetically. When the time came, and he entered that boardroom, he would not just present data, he would present a vision where progress and compassion could coexist. Little did he know, however, the true challenge lay not with Lana or any board member, but within himself, as he prepared to confront the realization that fear and growth were two sides of the same coin. As the meeting beckoned, he felt something shift inside. The moment of truth was upon him. He had cultivated every resource within. Now all that remained was to face the storm head-on. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the winds of doubt sweep him away? The boardroom awaited him, a stark fluorescent-lit arena brimming with polished wood and leather chairs that felt both intimidating and reflective of the corporate hierarchy he was determined to challenge. As Marcus approached the conference table, his heart pounded with the anticipation of potential rejection, yet an undercurrent of adrenaline surged through him, urging him to step beyond the shadows of doubt. He positioned himself at the front of the room, his prepared materials in hand, feeling an almost electric tension hum in the air. The board members settled in, their expectant gazes trained on him. Among them sat Lana, arms crossed, her expression inscrutable. It was as if she was testing his resolve, daring him to falter. This moment was his, and yet he felt the familiar churning of apprehension threaten to consume him. Inhaling deeply, Marcus began to speak. The initial tremor in his voice transformed into a steady cadence as he immersed himself in the narrative he had painstakingly crafted. With every statistic, he grounded his vision in reality, painting a picture of collaboration instead of competition. He outlined his strategy for integrating smaller firms, emphasizing how it could not only lead to financial growth, but also instigate a cultural shift that prioritized employee well-being and innovation. Yet as he navigated his presentation, doubt lurked just behind his resolve. He sensed Lana's critical scrutiny like a weight pressing against his shoulders. There was a palpable tension between them, a battle of ideologies that had been brewing long before this meeting. He could feel her readiness to pounce on any sign of weakness. Predictable, he thought, recalling her known tendency to favor data that supported traditional strategies. But in that realization, a spark ignited within him. He was not just presenting facts, he was advocating for a transformative mindset. He needed to push through her skepticism. Moreover, he continued, the rhythm of his thoughts capturing the room's attention, our industry stands at the precipice of significant change. We must redefine our benchmarks of success to include sustainability and employee engagement. He noticed a flicker of intrigue in some of the board members' expressions, and this encouragement kindled his determination. This wasn't merely about heightening his professional standing. It was about advocating for what he believed was right, aligning his values with his ambitions. The stakes felt higher than the boardroom presentation itself. It was a fight against complacency, a stand for a future where empathy and business could coexist. He could feel the walls of doubt crumbling slightly, the opening he needed to delve deeper into his arguments. As he completed his presentation, Marcus sensed the tide was shifting. Questions arose, and instead of being reactive, he embraced each inquiry as an opportunity to fortify his stance. He remained calm under the barrage, drawing upon his well-prepared insights, while allowing his passion to shine through. He was not just another player in their game, he was a catalyst for change. Finally, as Richard wrapped up the discussion, he felt the ceiling of pressure lift a fraction. But then, Lana's voice sliced through the air. While your points are valid, they lack a comprehensive understanding of our stakeholders' needs. How can we convince them of this transition? In that moment, Marcus felt an unexpected clarity. It was not only a challenge, but an opportunity to engage further, to illuminate the interconnectedness of economy and ethics. This was less about defending than it was about unearthing deeper dialogue. Lana, that's a fair point, but what if we flipped the question? Instead of asking how we convince stakeholders of a transition, should we not prove to them how this transformation can benefit them directly? His thoughts raced ahead, weaving connections between potential stakeholders' values and the visionary blueprint he had proposed. But as the moment hung in the air, Marcus understood this was merely the beginning. The real battle was only just unfolding, not only against Lana or the board, but against the entrenched norms of the corporate landscape that had long gone unquestioned. He realized he had not just come to fight, he had come to redefine the very nature of possibility within this room. And as they began to delve into discussions sparked by his question, Marcus felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. Perhaps change was indeed within reach, but it would require more than just a presentation. It would require continued dialogue, resilience, and the courage to explore uncharted territories. Just when he thought the tide had finally turned, the clock ticked audibly in the silence that followed. He caught Lana's intense glare, and for a brief moment he saw a flicker of something between intrigue and annoyance. In that charged atmosphere, a thought struck him. This confrontation held the potential to either mark the beginning of his ascent or seal his fate as a transient figure in the company's narrative. Would he step bravely into this new era, or would fear wind up keeping him shackled to his past? His heart raced, readying for what would come next. As they dived deeper into debate, Marcus stood at a critical crossroads, teetering on the brink of transformation. Would he seize the moment and solidify his place within this new paradigm, or would the weight of old expectations pull him back into obscurity? As the debate swirled around him, Marcus remained acutely aware of the shifting dynamics in the room. No longer just an isolated presenter, he became an integral part of a collective conversation, a bridge between old paradigms and new possibilities. Each question, particularly the hard-hitting ones from Lana, began to spark in him a deeper understanding of the corporate complexities he was navigating. Marcus contemplated Lana's challenge, dissecting its implications even as her incisions into his argument continued to cut. How can we convince stakeholders of this transition? The question echoed like a drumbeat in his mind. He recognized she wasn't just opposing him. She was presenting a real concern, one he needed to address not only for himself, but for the entirety of his vision. He realized that persuasion was as much about understanding the audience as it was about presenting facts. He needed to craft a narrative that resonated with those he aimed to affect. This sudden revelation brought clarity. Marcus decided to recalibrate his approach. Rather than solely emphasizing the benefits of his proposal, he would also delve into the fears and reservations that stakeholders might be harboring. "What if," he suggested, his tone measured yet firm, "we tailored a communication strategy that speaks to both the benefits of this transformation and alleviates their concerns?" He leaned forward, capturing the room's attention. "What if we presented case studies of similar firms that successfully navigated transitions? By doing so, we can show our stakeholders that we are not embarking on a reckless venture, but a calculated move towards a brighter future." For the first time, he noticed a flicker of curiosity on the board members' faces, including the steely facade of Lana, who began to uncross her arms. Did she see the potential in his proposition? Was the tide turning, or could it simply be a mirage? To augment his strategy, Marcus instinctively began to sketch a framework on the nearby whiteboard, outlining the company's transformation roadmap, punctuated with clear milestones and anticipated benefits. As he worked, he felt a deeper connection to the task, as if each point drawn was constructing a bridge not only for the board but for himself, sealing his resolve that he would not retreat into the shadows of self-doubt. Yet despite the excitement that coursed through him, Marcus felt a flicker of doubt. Could he hold on to this momentum? What if they confronted him with another dreaded objection, one he had not anticipated? "Let's take a moment," Marcus said, deliberately pausing as he turned to face the board, gauging their reactions. "I want us to think about what could happen if we do nothing. If we stagnate, what message does that send to our stakeholders, to our employees? Are we not essentially choosing to remain adrift in a rapidly evolving landscape?" The atmosphere thickened. He could see the board members exchanging glances, the gravity of his words sinking in. This moment was both powerful and vulnerable. He wrestled internally with the weight of expectations resting upon him. Each revelation, each strategic pivot deepened his resolve. Then with renewed vigor, Marcus added, "By embracing this change, we not only prepare ourselves for the future, but also demonstrate that we stand firm to the values this company professes. Leadership isn't just about profits, it's about responsibility." As he spoke, he could feel his voice growing stronger, and a baffling calm descended, guiding him into unprecedented ground. Yet the spectre of inadequacy loomed large. What if he still failed to meet their expectations? What if the vision that had ignited a flame within him was extinguished by the weight of corporate inertia? He fought to silence these internal demons, reminding himself of the journey thus far, the arduous climb to this pivotal moment. Finally, he shifted his gaze back to Lana. Ultimately, it's not just about convincing others. It's about inspiring belief in a shared future. Will we dare to lead, or will we stand still and let change pass us by? The room held its breath, and the collective silence felt electric. Marcus felt a tremor of anticipation as he awaited their reactions. Would his words resonate? Would he provoke the challenge to expectation, or merely reinforce his position as an idealist without a plan? Just as he prepared for the next question, he noticed a faint smile creeping across Lana's face, a stark contrast to the ice-cold skepticism that had characterized their encounter. What did this mean? Her approval could be the turning point, or just another twist in a relentless corporate chess game. With the walls of doubt still pressing around him, a fresh wave of uncertainty washed over Marcus, compelling him to confront not only the board's response, but the limits of his own growth. How far would he push himself to embrace the unknown? And in this realization, he felt an unmistakable spark of possibility glimmering in the shadows, hinting at the challenges yet to come. As he prepared to address yet another inquiry, he sensed a turning point approaching. The confrontation among old and new ideologies had only just begun, setting the stage for a tumultuous yet transformative journey ahead. How would he answer not only the objections of the board, but the unspoken doubts within himself? The stakes had never felt higher. Marcus stood before the board, the silence amplifying the thrum of his heartbeat. He could feel their eyes on him, scrutinizing, probing for weakness beneath the surface of his newfound resolve. Was it the pressure that caused the knot in his stomach, or the nagging fear they would tear apart his proposal, reducing it to rubble like all his past attempts? The room's energy shifted as Lana leaned back in her chair, her expression contemplative rather than confrontational. It sparked a cautious hope in him. Could this be a pivotal moment of transformation, not just for the company, but for himself as well? "Marcus," Lana began, her tone more measured, "this is indeed a pathway we need to consider, but can you tell us about the potential risks of taking such a bold step? How do we ensure we're prepared for the backlash?" The question was steeped in skepticism, yet there was an undertone of interest in her voice. He seized the moment as a chance to further solidify his footing. Every change comes with risks, but stagnation carries far greater threats. If we hesitate, we risk falling behind our competitors, losing market share, and compromising our relevance. I don't want to sugarcoat the challenges we face, but I believe the potential rewards outweigh the fears. Feeling emboldened, Marcus's mind raced ahead. He needed not just to sell an idea, but to invite them into a shared responsibility. A shift in perspective could turn doubts into allies. Let's figure out a way to mitigate those risks. Perhaps we could implement a phased rollout, allowing us to adapt and respond as we observe initial outcomes. We can establish benchmarks to evaluate progress and gather feedback. It's about crafting a plan that evolves. As he spoke, the weight on his shoulders eased. Marcus was no longer solely defending his proposal. He was actively constructing a collaborative approach. The responsibility seemed shared, the pressure less daunting. The room slowly transformed, rather than adversaries. The board members appeared more like co-creators in this vision. But just as confidence layered itself over self-doubt, a thought crept in, insidious and insistent. What if they dismantled his plan with a well-reasoned counter-argument that he hadn't anticipated? His internal battle raged fiercely. He clung desperately to the memory of the work he had put in. The late nights analyzing data, the countless hours spent listening to other leaders, absorbing knowledge and insight, were not in vain. He had equipped himself with tools and experiences that boosted his capabilities. Clarity erupted in him, igniting a determination to highlight not just his vision, but the collaboration required to realize it. "I understand change is daunting," he said, addressing them with deliberate intent. "But I ask for your belief in this process. I need each of you to lend your expertise, to contribute your insights, and together we can build something formidable. Instead of opposition, let us discuss how we can leverage our unique strengths for unified progress." A few nods appeared within the boardroom. He took this as a sign of their shifting dynamics. Was belief taking root? Marcus felt a tangible connection with the members, a thread of shared purpose weaving into the very fabric of their discussions. Yet like a shadow on a sunny day, doubt stalked him still. Could he sustain this momentum? The room of colleagues turned collaborators felt euphoric, yet that exhilaration mirrored the fragility he felt within. His thoughts moved faster than he could articulate. The stakes were high, and he was acutely aware that this was not just about the company. It was a revelation of his own capabilities and self-worth. As the board started sharing their thoughts, features of hesitance melted into enthusiasm for dialogue. Just then, Marcus noticed that Lana's smile had transformed into something more supportive. It was no longer skepticism. It was recognition. Recognition that he had taken the first steps to become a leader worthy of followership, a synonym for growth rather than mere ambition. Before he could delve further into the conversation, the door swung open and the CEO entered. Tension rippled through the room, puncturing the optimism that had begun to take shape. How would he respond to what had just unfolded? Would he see the potential Marcus had ignited? All progress now relied on the thoughts and intentions of a man who held the key to success or ruin, leaving Marcus on the precipice of an even greater challenge. The moment had arrived to not only face the board, but confront what awaited him in the coming confrontation with the CEO. It was prelude to the ultimate test of his vision and determination. Could he persuade the final gatekeeper, or would his efforts slip away just as they had time and again? Marcus stood resolutely at the head of the conference table, the atmosphere charged with a blend of anticipation and anxiety. He could feel the weight of all eyes upon him, teetering between skepticism and curiosity. Nothing would define this moment as a definitive turning point more accurately than how he navigated the imminent conversation with Richard, the CEO who held the fate of his proposal in his hands. "Marcus, I arrived a bit late. What impact are we suggesting this new strategy will have on our bottom line in the coming quarters?" Richard's voice dripped with authority, yet beneath it lingered a note of intrigue. With confidence welling in him, Marcus responded with a calculated tone, "I believe we can see an uptick in engagement and profit if we pivot toward grassroots innovation and partnerships with smaller firms. In our current model, we risk stagnation, but by integrating these firms, we could capture new markets while cultivating loyalty." Richard nodded, still keenly assessing the proposal's viability. Marcus caught sight of Lana's encouraging smile, a beacon of support in the midst of an intense examination. It resonated deeply. She had transformed from challenge to ally. "We've got to weigh out the risks," Richard clarified, shifting the discussion toward a critical examination of the potential setbacks. "What's our fallback plan here?" It's imperative that we initiate a phased approach, Marcus reiterated, gaining firmness in his pitch. This allows adaptability coupled with risk assessment. Evaluating benchmarks continuously can equip us to pivot quickly if necessary. He could sense the board leaning in, each member thoroughly digesting his insights. This was growth born not just from self-directed ambition, but from collaborative conversation. As discussions deepened, an unexpected silence filled the room before Richard addressed Marcus again. Your insights are doing more than merely aligning with our corporate mission. They're reorienting how we see ourselves within the ecosystem. The acknowledgement sparked a wave of validation within Marcus. No longer just an invisible janitor, he stood recognized, a pivotal bridge between the entrenched corporate wall and the evolving landscape of innovative thought. Feeling emboldened, Marcus continued, "Moreover, the emotional fabric of this initiative isn't just strategy. It cultivates a sense of belonging among employees who might have felt overlooked in our traditional model." Each argument carved deeper the contours of his newfound identity. His voice, once barely above a whisper in the corridors, now resonated with authority and purpose. Yet in that moment of clarity, doubt flitted at the corners of his consciousness. Could this success hold when faced with the volatile nature of corporate dynamics? Would Richard, despite his approval, defer back to the old ways should external pressures arise? "Marcus, I appreciate your passion," Richard interjected, his demeanor shifting slightly toward uncertainty. "But how do we communicate this transition with our stakeholders effectively? We must ensure they perceive it as growth, not a deviation from our traditional practices." Marcus took a breath, recognizing this pivotal request not simply as skepticism, but as an invitation to solidify his position. "It's crucial we involve stakeholders in the process. Feedback loops, transparency, tailored messaging. These all harness their insights and mitigate resistance to change. It becomes less a corporate endeavor and more a communal vision." A ripple of agreement resonated within the board. Richard stroked his chin thoughtfully, contemplating Marcus's proposal. But before long, doubt leered back. "You know, change in a company this size rarely goes without conflict. We could face significant opposition from your typical stakeholders." "Exactly," Marcus exclaimed, relishing the engagement. "But instead of resisting that conflict, let's welcome it. Addressing concerns up front builds trust. By crafting a narrative that harkens back to our foundation yet embraces evolution, we can engage all stakeholders, ground ourselves in our roots while encouraging growth." Richard raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something akin to respect flashing across his face. "This is quite ambitious, Marcus." Suddenly, a warmth washed over Marcus, a feeling of trust, growth, and acknowledgement he had been aching for. "Ambition is a necessary catalyst for progress, but it must be grounded in responsibility," he replied, feeling a solid confidence awaken within him. It was evident that this was no longer a mere presentation. It had transformed into a collaborative movement. As the boardroom buzzed with murmurs of approval, a familiar sensation surged through Marcus, a clarity that bridged the past and present. From janitor to strategist, he had actively woven his understanding, securing a position not just in their eyes, but within himself. Richard's expression softened, an indication of acceptance resting beneath the skeptical surface. "All right, let's give this a focused approach. Draft the proposal, and we'll discuss it during the upcoming stakeholder meeting." As applause erupted from the board members, Marcus felt an undeniable swell of pride. His aspirations were no longer confined to whispers against polished floors. They now resided boldly in the fabric of corporate structure. In that unraveling moment, he had conquered not just self-doubt, but had achieved the transformative intersection of identity and purpose. This was a solid foundation. He'd synthesized ambition with authenticity, proving that the ladder to success often begins below ground level. Now, empowered and recognized, Marcus stepped out of the boardroom as a visionary architect of his future. He held on to the knowledge that change was the result of penetrating the layers of expectation and daring to express one's unique voice amidst uncertainty. He felt the resolve deeply iridescent within him. This was not merely a victory for a day, but an establishment of his journey, an unyielding testament to the power of taking risks informed by experience. As he ventured from the revolving doors of corporate confines, he was filled with clarity. This was just the beginning. In pursuit of growth, there is no waiting. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this unexpected journey, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Take action and be part of a community that champions personal transformation.